Now, as you know, we get a daily briefing from politicians to want to tell us about how many new cases or how many new clusters or how much testing or all the rest of it, the very latest up-to-the-minute data for you to be fully informed when it comes to the coronavirus, but also for you to be fully scared about what might be right around the corner. What you don't get on a daily basis is some indications about problems that are, for many people, just as serious, just as concerning as the virus. Now, again, let's not muck around. We all know how serious coronavirus is, and I'm not one of those people who's going to tell you it's just like the flu. I'm not. But wouldn't it be interesting if we could get a daily briefing about something like suicides? Well, wait till I give you those numbers in a moment or two's time. What about unemployment? Imagine if every single day they told us about not a dozen, but hundreds of people who had lost their jobs every single day. The Commonwealth Bank put out a report late last week, missed by much of the media, that actually gives us an insight into unemployment in Australia. Not just the national number, not just the state number, but the parts of Australia that are truly groaning right now in the pandemic of unemployment that exists right now. Have a look at these numbers. Unemployment nationally in July was 7.5%. Queensland is above that at 8.8%. Yet, of course, all the Premier wants to do is talk about cases of the virus. Well, imagine if somebody had the balls to ask her, what's the plan for the unemployment rate in Wide Bay, which is 17%, 10% above the national average? What about in the outback of Queensland, where it's 2.5%, almost 3% above the national average? What about in the southern bit of Moreton Bay, again, 10.5%. Ipswich, 10.1%. The Sunshine Coast, 9.8%. Or on the Goldie, where it is a full 1.5 points above the rest of the country. Of course, in Western Australia, where the Premier will give you a daily update that nothing is happening when it comes to coronavirus, well, nationally, 7.5% unemployment. In Western Australia, it's 8.3%. He hopes, that being Mark McGowan, that he can play border politics all the way till March next year. In Miranda, it's 18%. In the southwest of Perth, 9.1%. The northwest of Perth, 8.8%. The outer suburbs of Perth, 8.6%. More than 1% and a bit above the national average. Yet, no daily briefings there. Also today, we've got a report from people who desperately care about mental health. People who have been there helping to establish things that we now absolutely see as important bricks in the wall, if not the whole wall sometimes, when it comes to treating mental illness. The Headspace program. Well, Professor Ian Hickie has come forward with numbers here about suicide predictions over the next few years. Expect suicides in New South Wales to go up by 24.8%, an extra 1,000 people on top of the 5,000 people, sadly, expected to take their own life in the next few years. In Victoria, up 31%, or 993 deaths. Now again, if you decided that whatever the problem was, that we would give a daily briefing about it, that we would turn our entire national focus to stopping the curve, our attitudes would be different about unemployment. More importantly, about mental health. Most importantly, about those that are taking their own lives. Now, many of these suicides will be because of the economic rack and ruin that has come about because of the draconian lockdown or state lock-off policies that exist. It's not an accident that two of the states that are playing the border games the most, Queensland and Western Australia, are the worst when it comes to unemployment. In the capital city of Western Australia, unemployment is worse than it is in the entire country. In almost half a dozen locations in Queensland, it is worse than the state average, which is worse than the national average. When will we get a daily briefing? I'll even settle for a weekly briefing about statistics of those who have been driven to the edge in the past few months. Because if we did anything to flatten the curve of suicide, we would do something profoundly good for our fellow Australians. But alas, Cynical politicians and the people who are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by you and I to advise them will simply say there's no votes in it. Yet there are plenty of votes in scaring you witless about cases that are around the corner or the virus that might be under the bed. We all know what's happening in Victoria, but thankfully things are getting better there. We all know what's happening in New South Wales, but thankfully they've been able to handle it. But have the governments of Victoria and Western Australia really been able to handle unemployment? Will our country truly be able to handle suicides that have taken place over the past few months, let alone over the next few years? Professor Ian Hickie says from the Brain and Mind Research Organisation, part of Sydney University, that if unemployment stays over 10% in the country, it'll be an extra 1,000 people that will take their own lives. That's why unemployment matters. That's why jobs matter. That's why people being able to see their own families, if they have a job, like the FIFO workers in Tasmania or Western Australia, matters. Because rest assured, more people will have taken their own lives than will have died because of this bloody virus. And I repeat, for those that are half paying attention, I'm not downplaying the virus, but it's about time we started widening the circle and started putting a spotlight on the other things that are taking Australian lives, which doesn't mean we ignore the virus, but it also means we don't ignore the effects of how we have dealt with the virus.